My name is Ian Mitchell. I'm on the board of directors of the Ketamine Assisted Therapy Association of Canada, and I'm an emergency medicine physician in Kamloops, British Columbia. I've provided care for countless patients who've been brought to the emergency department with crippling depression and thoughts of suicide. It is the mandate of physicians, practitioners, and other professionals to support and protect these people. Unfortunately, the treatments and medications currently available are insufficient, something that those delivering care on the front lines all struggle with. Ketamine has an amazing safety profile and is considered an essential medication by the World Health Organization. I've been using it to help emergency patients for 25 years, but under current physician regulations, when it comes to providing ketamine for mental health indications, I'm unable to provide it. At CATA Canada, we recognize the need for more effective treatments and are providing information and advocacy to make ketamine-assisted therapy readily available to every Canadian who needs it.
To the first annual World Psychedelics Day. My name is Shannon Smedella. I am one of the spokespeople, business advisor, and event producer for World Psychedelics Day, and I'm pleased to be your host for this very special discussion today. We're excited for you to join us for this panel as a part of World Psychedelics Day, and it is our pleasure to bring to you these amazing panels, including expert interviews with over 40 doctors, researchers, rabbis, therapists, ceremonialists, Indigenous wisdom keepers, artists, activists, and more. Each of our speakers and panels will be showing up to share illuminating information in their area of expertise. I'd like to introduce our speakers today, Dr. Joe Tafur, Dr. Ketan Patel, Dr. Ben Medrano. So Dr. Joe Tafur is a family physician, ayahuasquero, and author. Dr. Joe Tafur has been exploring the biology of emotional healing for over a decade, a journey that began in medical school. Dr. Tafur found the Western approach to healthcare to be capitalistic, oppressive, and limited in scope. After falling into a depression, Dr. Tafur began exploring plant medicine treatments such as peyote and ayahuasca. In his book, The Fellowship of the River, A Medical Doctor's Exploration into Traditional Amazonian Plant Medicine, Dr. Tafur chronicles his trip down to the Peruvian Amazon to try ayahuasca. What he discovered amazed him, which inspired Dr. Tafur to stay in the jungle and study ayahuasca shamanism. Now he's exploring how emotional healing from psychedelics could potentially heal our genetics. Dr. Tafur is conducting a study alongside the MAPS Phase 3 clinical trials to evaluate the role of our emotions on our physical health, the effect of trauma on our genes, and the potential for psychedelics to heal our genes. Dr. Ketan Patel is a physician, psychonaut, and expert in artificial intelligence and natural language processing. He is chief medical officer and board member at PsyTrue, where they have become global leaders in the mining of health data from unstructured medical records at a massive scale. At last count, their company has analyzed data from over 10 billion pages of medical information. He is also chief executive officer at Navigesia, and I hope I pronounced that correctly. We're a real-world data gathering software platform deeply rooted in the clinical neurosciences space and in the cannabis and psychedelics markets. Ketan is keenly interested in the codification of the ineffable. Dr. Ben Medrano is the Senior Vice President and Medical Director of Field Trip Health USA, a rapidly growing international psychedelic venture. While struggling with his own trauma, Dr. Medrano was fortunate to have been exposed to psychedelics at an early age during the dawn of the 90s rave culture in Chicago. These psychedelic experiences led him down a 20-year path of intensive training with the Tibetan Buddhist community, where he completed Buddhist ceremony and spent years in service to his spiritual guides while traveling as far as India and Tibet. Prior to launching Field Trip's first psychedelic clinic in the US, his primary focus was serving the urban underserved through assertive community treatment in East Harlem. The majority of his early career was spent doing some visits for high-risk state-assigned clients through New York City while developing his own unique treatment style, synthesizing integrative psychiatry, Buddhist theory of mind, and psychedelic harm reduction and integration. He continues to see patients today at the Field Trip NYC and teaches physician trainees on the utility of psychedelics, ketamine-assisted therapy, and mindfulness meditation for mental health at the Mount Sinai Hospital Network. So let's get into the questions. Thank you all for being here today with us. It is such a pleasure to have you all in the same room. Can you each tell us a little bit about the work that you are currently doing in the psychedelic field?
I am Joe Tafur. I'm a family practice doctor. Here's my bio. Right now, currently, we're running the Modern Spirit Epigenetics Project with MAPS to get an idea. We can talk about that more maybe down the road, but to try to understand how trauma healing, the biological side of trauma healing and what that might look like, and what are the mechanisms involved or the ones that we can identify, and just all the ripples that kind of opens up as far as our understanding of deep emotional healing. And then I'm also I'm the ayahuasquero for the Church of the Eagle and the Condor, which is in the United States, and it's a spiritual community based here in Arizona. And so we're pursuing our legal rights to practice sacred ayahuasca ceremony. So so the other big thing that so there's the research side around trauma healing and emotional healing, but then also the spiritual practice side of this world. That's what I'm working on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe. Keaton, we'll go to you.
Sure. No, a pleasure to be here. And I guess my day job really is spent, luckily, in the presence of folks like Joe and Ben. I mean, people who are doing great research, who have to collect information, collecting it from either a trial setting or in a patient clinical setting, and helping individuals, organizations really put that information into digital format so it could be shared, could be cataloged, could be normalized. And so, in the psychedelic field, we're helping people from, one person therapist office to departments that are thinking about bringing this online, on their premises. So, just happy to be here and happy to share what I've learned so far.
Thank you so much. Ben, let's go to you.
I'll just start by saying it's an honor to be here amongst such innovators and open-minded proponents of bringing psychedelics to people who need them. And I just want to say, Joe, it's actually a dream to be on this panel with you because I really enjoyed your book, and it's actually been a major influential book for me. So for people out there, if you haven't read it, good book, Fellowship of the River. Just give a plug for Joe. Yeah, what we're doing here at Field Trip, I think we've got a pretty strong marketing team, so you probably have heard some of what we're doing already, but we're trying to roll out clinics as quickly as possible for ketamine-assisted therapy and create the foundation to deliver psychedelic-assisted therapies across not only the US and Canada, but elsewhere. Currently, we have a number of clinics here in the States, including in Chicago, New York, Atlanta, as well as Houston and LA. And in Canada, we have one in Toronto. We also have a Truffles center that recently opened up in the Netherlands. And we have a research facility down in Jamaica that's looking at somewhere around 200 strains of psilocybin-containing mushrooms. We also have a drug development arm looking at novel molecules that might be able to be used in our treatment model and beyond, and also doing some stuff with digital media, including our Trip app and patient portal, which is sort of a unique platform that we use to help our patients prepare and integrate within our clinics.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ben. And it's great to see all of the work that all of you are doing. So we have science and we have spirituality, and we have this thing called consciousness. So let's talk a little bit about this. And science, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they've never really come up with a satisfying definition of consciousness. As for it to be a subject of science, it has to be measurable or quantifiable somehow. Science is traditionally a bit wary of words like spirituality. And we have an amazing room of people here who have kind of like one foot on both sides. So one foot on each side. So, number one, what could science learn from a really good trip? And number two, how can we marry these two? How do they work together, science and spirituality?
We're just going the same round again, or
Sure, if you want to go first,
I
Joe.
think Keaton seems like he's about to say something.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, this what was really attractive about this topic is that it's like two ends of a line, right? Or two ends of a spectrum where you've got, at least for me, the definition of spirituality being, hey, everything that goes beyond my skin. The things inside my skin really are, reductionist molecules, organs, cells, all these things that we can define, we can measure. And for me, we do the science because I think there's this other side of spirituality or this unknown we want to get to. And so it makes it more interesting. So I think the idea of science and spirituality, you can't have one without the other. You'd have no direction. Where are you heading, right? So yeah, we have a world where we have definition. We can define things. We can measure. We can quantify. We can codify all those. And I think we're right at that boundary right now as we explore the psychedelics and this realm. We don't have sensors for some of the experiences that you encounter inside of a trip. And as such, you don't have potentially a strong language for how you communicate that information. But if we can do that, then we can start to bring that boundary a little further out. And I think that's what I'm really excited about. So I'm not sure if I'm answering that question. I think it's a really broad one, but to me, you can't have one without the other, at least philosophically.
Thank you so much. Joe, did you want to take a shot at that one next?
I mean, I think it's just, to me, it's kind of like, it's very semantic to me, like like as far as science as a religion, science as people's religion. In other words, if I claim that I'm a scientifically minded person, I'm a rational person or something like that, then I guess that means that when we come to the edge of what my science can describe, when we come to the edge of what I can measure and whatever share in that way, then everything past that I put my faith in, that science is going to explain that to me. That's a leap of faith, So I respect that person's faith. That's how they deal with that mystery. They say, oh, science, 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 but it's not going, it's there. And so then they have that leap of faith. And then what's strange to me is this discomfort with the idea that somebody else is also doing the same thing, that somebody else is also putting their faith in a set of ideas or some felt understanding. Eventually they just trust it, or they intuit that, yes, I'm going to go along with that, or maybe they're scared. And then that felt sense of like what it is that guides us ultimately as emotional beings, that there's just so much of that, like people making their decisions every day as if they did it like through a computer all the time. They don't, and so that felt sense of the subjective side of life that, we keep hearing about, that science shies away from, although it's a huge part of depression research, anxiety research, psychotherapy. It's just like, it's so already out. I don't know. To me, it's like, it's getting kind of silly, and what I always say is that it's coming from a brokenhearted place. It's a brokenhearted place that people can't talk about their feelings. They can't talk about these things that he says outside of their skin, what they can sense, but maybe not explain that well, or mechanisms, or all that blah, blah, blah. And it's because in the scientific world, and my experience as a doctor and some experience in academia, there's just not that space being held for people to be vulnerable, to be held vulnerable, safe, free from judgment. When you hold people in that kind of space, like the ritual space, the ceremonial space, pretty much every time, they start opening up about all kinds of things that they experience in their life. And so I just find that it's really a symptom of that we just need to have a lot more of that for people to be able to have more honest discussions about what they experience, not just on psychedelics, but just being alive. And so, yeah, that's my comment.
Thank you so much. Ben?
Yeah, oh, this is actually one of my favorite questions. I love talking about consciousness, and I think it's a fun topic to have because it's there's plenty of room for opinions and varied perspectives, and I think it's all true. Whatever somebody shares in terms of their opinion of consciousness, based on how they're perceiving it and what frame of reality they're perceiving from, then you have to honor that. I think like what Joe was saying is, that comes from a place that deserves to be honored. It comes from a very human place, a raw place, and it is sort of the beauty of what it means to be human, to have diverse perspectives. At the same time, part of in your question, I hear, well, how is science relating to this? And like, how are they perceiving consciousness now? And how does it relate to psychedelics? And I feel like the good news is that in a way we are starting to see a sort of opening of well, questioning our own perspectives of what reality is from a scientific vantage point. Even just saying, let's use a questionnaire called the Mystical Experience Questionnaire. Like, I just think that's wonderful that we even have such a thing in science now, that we're actually just going to call the ineffable something, and at least honor it in people's experience and try to measure it so that we could begin to say maybe there's a different way that healing occurs. And this has occurred in part and has been popularized, this way of thinking in science, through psychedelics. So I see this sort of converging on these topics just within this question as when I look at the research now, I see a lot of promise. And also just the fact that we have a few doctors here, they're just willing to talk about it and riff upon it. And not only that, to try to create treatments and initiatives to help people in honoring what we're talking about here. So I guess I just feel really good about the direction things are going in this regard. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And it can be difficult working in a field, where a part of the field doesn't want to explore, consciousness, and they're really just stuck on the experimental science there. And a large, this kind of leads me into another question here, and kind of a big one, but a large percentage of doctors working in the field of psychedelics and outside of psychedelics state that the psychedelic experience happens only in the brain. So I'm wondering, from a spiritual perspective, what your spiritual and scientific perspective, what is your viewpoint on this?
I'll jump in real fast. No, I think, something that everyone's been saying that keeps being true. I spoke at the Oxford Psychedelic Society little Zoom group. It's just a little Zoom group, but for me, it was a big deal, Oxford, and then there's a faculty member there, senior faculty, psychiatry department. So he's saying that, he's saying, oh, it's just in the brain, and, come on, let's keep it to the brain. But he also is saying, and this is an older gentleman, from Oxford, he's also saying, well, the reality is we're kind of in a plurality now. Like, nobody has to be right all the way, and we don't have to sit here and get our, panties in a bunch because he's like that, people are finally become, nobody knows. It's whatever you believe, Oh, it's all in your brain. Okay, like I just said earlier, that's there. They don't have proof of that, to limit it to that. They have some evidence to make their argument, just like the other person has evidence to make their argument, what he's talking about. So I just, and we had that discussion at that setting, in that place where I was invited, because of my experience with indigenous culture and traditional wisdom, at Oxford, to share that with them. And so I think that it's a new day where it's opening up. Like, it's the gray area is okay to talk about. I don't know, these people, this like staunch resistance that people are worried about. I'm just not finding it. It's like a relic. I'm sure there are those people that want to get all upset about that, but there's so many that don't. And so I just want to say that it's like, nobody knows the answer to that question. And that, I don't know, people are uncomfortable with that, or they like to just, have something to say, or, yeah, no, it's all in your brain, but nobody really knows that. We don't even know how we're talking to each other right now, And so that's like, then we're kind of being a little more wise. Hey, now we're really talking. Why is that so uncomfortable for people when it's part of our every single moment of our life? I don't know. That's my startup comment.
I think I agree with you, Joe. I mean, does it matter if we have the answer, right? I mean, that's the other side of that, which is I can pick a camp, or I can choose to pick the middle and just say, I don't really know. And maybe we'll never know as a society, as a species. And it doesn't really matter. It's what it represents. And I think that's really interesting as we start. And Ben, you mentioned the Mystical Experiences questionnaire, and there's a number of other questionnaires, right? Like the Oceanic Boundlessness one, or the how much dread do you have if you feel that your ego is dissolving. So at the end of the day, it's maybe those that verbiage, or those metaphors, or those representations matter more, and not necessarily where they're coming from and where they're emanating from and which galaxy they're from, or all the other stuff that happens. But it just enriches our experience of this construct, right? So I mean, we're all physicians. We've all spent times probably in the allopathic world, and time outside of it. And it's a very flat world, the allopathic world. It's really got nothing mysterious going on there. There's really not a lot of texture in that fabric. So, I'm for one, am open to the idea of, let's bring some color, some creativity and some color and texture and dimension to the way we interact. And it really doesn't matter which camp we're in.
Yeah, and there is a call of urgency too to be open-minded, right? We look at the state of society now, and then we look at the state of mental health, and we look at the tools that we have. I think part of this openness, it comes out of we're being called to be open, because a lot of what we're trying to use and what we've been using for many years is simply just not working as well as we thought it would, or we would have liked. And so we have to go back to the drawing board. And unfortunately, when we go back actually, in this case, with a broken heart, because, it's hard for medical providers, for psychiatrists to day in, day out have to watch their clients go through what we put them through with these medicines or these medications. And to be able to have another option, and I think is something that we're hungry for. And so, yeah, again, the debate of consciousness becomes secondary. Like, if you're going to take a stance, like, how is that going to serve you and all your many patients who are all going to have different tools for meaning making and different perspectives on what healing even is, or what contentment or wellness, like, that's going to be different for people. And so the open-mindedness is not only required in terms of the treatment options, it's required in terms of the approach. Like, we ourselves have to do the work for ourselves to be open and willing to actually empathize with people on a level we might not have done before or had ever been trained to do. And that's a big part of, why I think all of us are passionate about what we're doing here, because I think on some level, we probably, all of us on this panel, have experienced that, what I'm saying, ourselves.
Yeah, I would just jump in and just say, it's health that's driving it. It's health that's driving it. And so then these things are coming from, just like from my, background, it's like the ancestral traditions around this stuff. It was for healing, like holistic healing, profound healing, spiritual healing, emotional healing, all the rest of it. Like, that's one of the things that this kind of substance has always been known to be good for. And so it's like, it's the disease in the society, that brings us to this point. That's why, it's like, it's the dogma, people's tendency to be dogmatic in this direction or that direction. It's just conditioning from their culture, from whatever, from their family. Like, they don't really care. They don't really believe in that, actually, because when their family member is suffering, like, greatly, they're ready to open their mind to a new way of looking at things. And that's what drives this whole thing. And so it's like, people, we know, like people like, okay, they get stuck in their position, and that's probably like, you know, that closed-mindedness is probably a symptom of an issue, you know. It's a symptom of an issue tending into mental health issue, can be, you know, can get to that point as we start learning about more of the neuroscience of default mode network and all that kind of stuff, and things that meditation are helping, things that psychedelics can make an impact on. And so that's what that is, you know, when somebody's really like closed in their head about something, could be a problem, you know, just noting that first as we expand our understanding. And secondly, like when they are suffering, you know, a great deal, then they're ready, you know, they're ready to learn something new. If somebody can help them, they don't, it's not coming from like, oh, the ideological, wait, I was right and you were wrong. What's going on? Hey, I was right and you were wrong. You know, it's like, well, we're not there right now, because it's like, this is somebody's mom and they're really having a hard time, or this is their son. And wow, he, you know, he wants to hurt himself. So we kind of have to grow up past that part, you know, when it comes to healthcare.
Thank you so much. We did have a conversation when speaking with Dr. Andrew Weil on the topic, and speaking about healthcare and root cause and diseases. He mentioned that the root cause of the disease starts on a level that was actually beyond the body, and I believe he was referring to how Chinese medicine looks at disease. And you know, even if we look at Eastern medicine and Ayurveda, it's the same idea. So this ends up crystallizing in the physical body as an effect of the root cause not being dealt with at a deeper level. So I was wondering if you could speak to this from your perspective, and possibly how psychedelics can help get to the root cause if it's at that deeper level beyond body mind or in body mind, or also get to that root cause in body mind and treat that.
I'm going to jump in, but at the same time, you know, having you know, heard a bit about like what the ayahuasqueros do in the Shipibo tradition, I feel like they're well equipped to answer this question. But I'm thinking about it more from this sort of a Buddhist perspective and just an experience here in this clinic. And, what comes to mind first is, you know, when my colleagues ask me, you know, what does this work like, you know, doing like, what does it end up looking like in the room? And I never have one, you know, clear, consistent answer. The reality is people all individually have their own process, and some things that sort of come up is quite unpredictable, you know, and a lot of people have physical processing of their emotion, you know, purging, crying, shaking, yelling, needing to move around, and then having also all this sort of abstract symbolic content coming up that needs unpacking and integration and so on, and then also just this experience of connectedness that I think that most of us need in order to heal. Like, we need a sense of community and connection and care, and to be held, and to know that we're at least you know, understood or held with some empathy, regardless of all the world's judgments that are laden upon people. And so and then a colleague will sort of ask, well, what is the mechanism of ketamine? And I'm like, well, why is that even that important here? And, you know, I think it is important from a safety perspective. It is important in terms of, you know, just screening and looking at contraindications. But at the end of the day, for us therapists, when we're sitting in the room, we're not thinking about biochemical mechanisms. We're thinking about, you know, what is going on in the room in this moment, and how is it being expressed physically, emotionally. And I think that is really the power of this work, is sort of what's being indicated here is, you know, when you're looking at your patient, if you're truly caring, you're not getting lost in the weeds with the science. You're focusing on these different levels of how people present to you energetically, physically, emotionally. And that's what calls the attention for true healing to happen. I reserve my other comments from a Buddhist perspective for later.
And thank you for that. I think that's debate, from my perspective, and I'm not bringing in a sort of a traditional, let's say a religion or a doctrine, but if you take the most staunch physicians out there who may be, anti-psychedelics or anti this kind of work, but you ask them about the placebo effect or you ask them about white coat syndrome, they seem to have no issues. And it's like, okay, so in the physical realm, something from maybe a psychic origin manifested as either a high blood pressure or as a rash or as a drug side effect. And yet, what's the explanation? And then generally, the conversation goes cold. So, I think if you take away all the doctrine and you take away sort of, thoughts or systems of belief, and you just get to just that one or two concepts, I mean, I think most physicians would agree there is a strong connection between mind and body. It's just what label are they, are they accepting of or willing to give? It's like, which stage of denial are you in right now? So it's, I think it's just a matter of time, and it's a matter of sort of, more examples and more, research and sort of putting it in a place where they're going to understand this and then accept it. I think it's just time. So, I'm super positive that, mind body medicine and some of the comments that Dr. Weil made, I mean, they make sense, but it just depends on what baggage you have and what degree of acceptance you're at with respect to this kind of phenomenon.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. On both comments, yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, I think it's the different camps, as Keaton's been mentioning, and then it's what's going on. So it's eventually the underpinnings of it, the metaphysics of it. If that's something that intrigues you, if that's something you want to learn about, if that's something you want to work with, then you could see how it'd be very useful and important to study things from a Chinese acupuncture meridian standpoint, from Ayurvedic like chakra standpoint, from Shipibo, shamanic. If I'm going to be helping the people by singing songs to them into their energy body, yeah, like I want to study that. I want to see how does the energy of this trauma sit, around their uterus, for example. Like that's interesting to me, and it's interesting because I'm going to use it. And then it'd be interesting for the patient if it makes a difference for them. Then it's interesting for everybody. Before that, it's just people sitting around talking about stuff, So then for me, this mind-body, structure, framework, that's become pretty, like we said, it's pretty established. And so like what I'm trying to add to that discussion coming from this, this other cultural perspective is like, okay, well, what's there? Well, the emotion, the emotion is a big bridge point there in the mind body that the science does admit, the culture does accept, that like Keaton says, there may be a lot of denial, but that emotion exists. Like it's hard to deny, even in our society, even at high level academic, scientific kind of discussion. And so there is emotion. And then that's the place, where it's maybe easier to see where the energy side that some of the other cultures, other perspectives, other camps will entertain, like that's what does it feel like, to be moved, to be inspired? What does it feel like in your body, and why is it that, so then this emotional work that Ben might be doing, and but the kind of support that he's doing, providing whatever support that is, during that session. And then some shaman might come and say, oh, what, did you know you were doing this and this? And you held there, the 4 pillars of whatever, and this, and then this came in, and then you were there, and then the extraterrestrial, you were right there. You did it just right. And he's like, well, I wasn't thinking about that. But, thank God, yeah, there was a big shift that happened. So again, every single time it's about the patient. It's about the healing. It's about the progress. It's about the growth. It's the ideology is there's a lot of camps, like it keeps coming up over and over again. You give all these different people ketamine, guess what? It doesn't work the same way on everybody. Turns out the blood pressure medication doesn't work the same way on everybody either. Truth be told. So there's room, but I think it's just like leaving the room, but also being responsible. Like Ben says, why? Okay, safety, very important thing. Other big one is like, okay, what are they fighting about the biological mechanisms? Well, because they want to deny care. Whatever resistance is there, whether that's economic resistance or resistance for, compensation of care, that's why they blow it off. That's a heavy force. So there's one. So that's another reason we have to address that. We do have to address safety and, and to be responsible, to be as responsible and to know as much as we can about what we're doing. Those are good reasons, but then the other, why address the emotional dimension? Well, because it can really make a difference for people. Why talk about it in spiritual terms? Well, sometimes, that can be very useful with the right, crowd.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So I have one more question in that area, and then we're going to move on to some AI and epigenetics as well. And you don't have to answer this question if you don't want. But when working with certain plant medicines, is it important to have a shaman or someone trained with working with energy or different dimensions to ensure safety on that level of existence? And are we just working with the patient, or are there other, I guess you can say, parties coming into play or entities or whatnot that the shaman or energy worker would have to deal with?
I'll just jump in to open that one up. That I think that's what's happening right now. So I go like soft with it because we respect everybody's different perspective, and we're not trying to, But then, do I believe that knowledge is useful? That like kind of a spiritual ceremonial experience and shamanic type of knowledge is useful in those spaces and places. And I find that the people moving in the psychedelic psychotherapy direction, a lot of them want to learn more and more, whatever they can from the energetic teachers because they're seeing that they're finding utility in that. That being said, like with ayahuasca and my tradition, yeah, we do believe that. We do believe that there's a big energetic component to address, and that it is something to be careful about, to be very careful with. So we advise that, yeah, you should be with somebody that has experience and knows what they're doing with that kind of stuff, because strange things do happen, And so for me, it's like that, but I'm not like pushy. Everybody needs to do this, and this is the only no, because I went to MDMA psychotherapy myself. Wow, had a beautiful experience. I've had beautiful experiences in other ways of healing, and I think they did a good job. But those people, the truth is, the ones that I work with, they're very interested in ceremonial, ritual, energetic considerations, extremely interested. And that's my experience over and over again with people. There are some people want to just give ketamine and, whatever, make their money, but a lot of people don't. That's not the only thing happening. Like, big pharma is going to come destroy everything. That's not the only thing that's going on, So people have to wake up a little bit and see what's happening. People want to learn about this. So that's what we're, the Church of the Eagle and the Condor, our community is, we have Native people trained in these traditions that want to share. They want to exchange for the good of everybody. And so I think there's room for that. And I think it should be addressed. It's something people should be careful about.
I'll follow up here with my experience within the Tibetan Buddhist community is, having a long period not actually working with psychedelics personally and spending much of my time doing those practices. I think I walked away with a very strong respect for the power of ceremony and setting, and the view of the practitioner who creates that space for empowerment or healing or whatever it is. It's palpable. I think regardless of having a psychedelic there or not, when you're around practitioners, be it a shaman, be it a yogi or a Tibetan lama, or even be it a very accomplished a pastor or priest, people notice a change in their experience of space in the presence of those people. I think that I've heard that so many times, and we've heard that throughout history. There are people designated as saints, like, well, where did that come from? Or, people designated as reincarnates or masters. It comes from the fact that there's an irrefutable sense of alteration of the healing space or the space that you're in relation to that practitioner. And so in Buddhism, we say that the power of that comes from one's view and one's motivation. So how do you view reality, and how and what drives you? Like, are you doing whatever it is that you're doing the ceremony for the benefit of your own self-aggrandizement, or are you trying to build up get yourself many Rolls Royces, or are you doing it to actually benefit as many people as you can with what you have to offer with this special perception that you have and this big heart that you have? And so I sort of feel that that's like, you see this across all the fields and traditions. You'll find these remarkable people, and including in medicine. And when you pair those powerful views and motivations together with whatever their skill set is for being able to create a sacred space with these mind altering substances, well, yes, you have a powerful opportunity for transformation for people. I've experienced it and I've seen it. And so it doesn't matter to me necessarily which tradition, as long as, again, it is respectful of the patient and their views and wishes.
I have nothing to add. I mean, it's hard to follow those answers, and I would agree, the compound is one thing, but who's in the room with you is so important. And it's sometimes is maybe not even reflective of their skill in this art or in this therapy. It's just who they are as an individual. And you are so open during a psychedelic experience that you're gonna feed off of that. And so, if I look back at my, limited, but still, quite a number of psychedelic experiences, I've had folks in the room who could be classically called a shaman, and I've had people in the room who are therapists and come from a very medical, sort of background. But there's just something there. There's a presence. They're holding space. The folks who are bringing that to the table aren't getting enough of the credo right now, and I think we're going possibly in the wrong direction by making this a weekend course thing and throwing people in front of others and saying, look, now you're ready to give ketamine, or you're ready to administer a psilocybin experience. So yeah, I absolutely agree that we've got to go towards that kind of experience and that traditional, generationally informed kind of wisdom that you just can't get any other way.
And just to quickly add, and that's what the reductionism costs us. It doesn't matter. Just everyone take Prozac. It's all the same. Just talk to them. Here, show me the manual. What's the CBT? What does it say? Okay. Do you have this? Did I tell you what's the new acronym? Can you give me the next 5 acronyms we have to learn this week? Make sure you tell all your patients the acronyms. Did you do this? Did you do that? If you do the acronym, then this shows this difference. It's like it's not real. Like surgery. Okay, they have to be good at it. Like everybody knows that. You have to be good at it. You don't send your family member to just any doctor. You want the one that you heard is a good one that relates well to the people, unless you don't have a choice, then yeah, you go to whoever, because it matters. Like every single thing, everything, everybody knows that. So then they just tried the study world. While it's still in the study world, sure, they're stuck. They're like boxed in, so they can't talk about what goes on in the sessions, but everybody knows that the MAPS therapists are handpicked, this big, oh my God, they're getting a transformative healing. You think they just picked anybody and just did? No, they didn't, so it makes a big difference. And it's so obvious. And so that's what's kind of like, to me, is so, I don't know, this isn't about that, but just, the kind of venture capital and the whole movement and the money movement around it is just like, that's not how mental health works. It's so individual, it's so personalized. So this idea that it's just like all we needed was just the capitalists to show up, It's like because they're smart enough to make millions, and so everybody else must be a dummy, Everybody's too stupid. So once they come, it's so easy. Just show me how to, hand out the paperwork, hand out the acronyms, hand out the thing. Well, that's how we got where we are. It doesn't work like that. So of course it makes a difference. Like it's silly that we, once it's okay to go out there, it'll be alive, and you'll go to the one that's a good one, and the ones that aren't so good at it, they're not going to get very good results. No.
I'll follow up with that, because actually I think that's the biggest challenge that I mean, personally in my position, I feel faced with, is like, how do we create that integrity in the service that we're providing, how do we train people? How do we scale up quickly? Like how do we meet the need? And it's the biggest challenge to try to figure out. And it all has to do with, as I think others have said here, like we do need to be very particular about who we choose to be offering this service to people to begin with. Like, and then on top of that, we need to make sure that we're providing at least the core competencies to provide safe, adequate care. I think the thing that I keep thinking though is like, well, everybody wants to be the like best in class or the gold standard, or I think how it's going to pan out is that there's going to be a little bit of compromise, and that is sort of a sad aspect of it in a way, because sure, we're not delivering all the time at the most highest potential when we have such a large scale need, but then the next question is, well, still, what are the outcomes? Are we helping? Are we broadening access? And so the beautiful thing is that there are so many people who are bringing this to the table that I feel confident that in the future that people will find that provider, that person that they need to really address their concern in due time. I think just making it accessible and popularizing it is a good influence on society so that people can feel not stigmatized for even looking.
Is there anything else anyone wanted to add to that?
Go ahead, Kate.
No, I was going to say, Joe, you mentioned reductionism. And I think that's very important. We're at a risk of that phenomenon happening here, right? When we get to the point where it's compound plus weekend trained therapists equals trip, we're in big trouble, right? So I think the idea of, as traditionalists come into this field, learning as much as we can from their approach, what is it that they're doing while they're in, sort of the presence of their client or their patient, and being able to communicate that effectively is a huge leap right now. Because if we don't communicate that well, we don't capture that information in some way and codify it, then you mentioned earlier economic resistance, right? Or denial of care. It's very easy for them to say, well, I'm not really sure all you've done is achieve some sort of sensory theater with that dose of psilocybin. They saw elves, or they saw, something organic moving around. Did they actually achieve something therapeutic in that instance? And if there's really no way to document that, then I think we're collectively in trouble. So I think these traditional models just need to be explored far deeper than we've even started to, and really understand, like, what's the significance of an entity. I mean, it doesn't matter that it's real or it isn't, or we don't believe it's real, but what's the significance of seeing an entity, and what's their behavior of that entity while you're in a trip, and how do we document that? Because that could be that sort of breakthrough for that client. And if we can't communicate that to the insurance providers, or we can't communicate that to our fellow caregivers, we're stuck in that reductionist world, and then we'll be right back where we started, I think.
But then, just to add to that is like, so then one of our answers to that issue is that this reductionist world is, there is a material element to everything that's going on. There is a material element to what Andrew Weil's talking about, and the chakras and all the rest of it, and the molecules. It's like, yeah, they are, magical as far as we, all proof points to that, actually. And so these magical molecules, one of the things, and the next here about the AI, because all that kind of like world of analysis, that starts to get beyond, you start getting out of the box, like to run this stuff, have the computers do it, and how, it's like, does anyone even really understand? I mean, are we comfortable that we're using this technology right now, to do this? Maybe Kaiten understands. I don't understand so much how this works that we're communicating on, and then, but in trying to look for some proof, some evidence, some biological mechanism. For example, in the case of the MAPS MDMA trial, it's like, well, they had a transformative healing. Like, they had a transformative healing. No one, that's proven now. That's been the evidence based. And then they had like a big emotional shift. Like, a lot of people would admit that as well. Like, wow, psychologically, whatever they feel comfortable, all the criteria they just used to prove Prozac, they used it on this, and it was significant. And then they also, well, there's a big emotional biology associated with that level of PTSD. There's a whole research world around this mind-body network that we've been talking about, the mind-body, mind-body, mind-body. Well, one of the big elements of that, when I call the emotional body, the psychoneuroendocrine immunologic network, is this HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, where the cortisol circuit there in the body that's, related to our fight or flight and our stress response systems that we know is impaired in PTSD, advanced PTSD. Like if you have 20-year chronic treatment resistant PTSD, high likelihood, like you have an HPA disturbance, like it's in your flesh. We're not just talking talk. It's not just woo woo anymore. Emotional trauma is hurting the way your body works, which we already knew that, but now we know that a lot more because of all this research that has been coming out of the mind body world. So it's not just blah, blah, blah. This is fact. This is medical knowledge that, you can, like you said, depending on your amount of baggage, you can open yourself and learn from the evidence. And so as we look at that evidence, we try to understand where can we find signs of where that trauma, so when the person goes to war and they come back, no one's like scratching their head, I wonder what happened to them. I wonder where that came from. Was it the energy? Was it the what? It's like, oh yeah, the war. I don't know how it changed their body. But yeah, it changed something in them. Everybody knows that. Oh, well, that sexual abuse really severe. While the person's health has really taken a shift, a stable shift. They've been stuck like that for years, struggling. Their health is declining, on multiple measures. With PTSD, you have inflammatory markers, you have autonomic disturbance, you have this HPA axis disturbance. There's neuroscience stuff, things, the amygdala in the brain, all these different parts of their functioning, of their normal emotional health, how they respond to stress, So then it turns out the epigenetics, that's one area that we decided to go after because it's this idea that the genes, that this HPA axis, there's certain genes that control the function of that. And those genes, we have evidence that those genes can be affected, modulated, imprinted, maladaptive things that happen to them, imprints from the trauma. That we can see that got imprinted. And now all those people with PTSD, severe PTSD, there's a higher likelihood that these particular genes, they're going to show this methylation change, show this imprinting change on that part of those, on their DNA, package strand there. So then it's like, well, if we know the trauma is related to that imprinting, if we can show that, if there's a growing body of evidence that that's going on, when they had a huge healing and they had this biological shift, they're not waking up sweaty with nightmares anymore. Whatever you want to call that, to get the reductionist nightmares, reductionist help. They have nightmares. Anyway, their nightmares are gone, and so something in their body is not the same as it was. So then we said, let's check their saliva before and after so that they should make sense that there should be a shift there. And so the early evidence from the preliminary group is positive, so they're doing the publication right now, getting it ready, following up on the MAP study that was just published in Nature Medicine, a few weeks ago. So this is like impactful, evidence-based to show to the people, to show to the insurance company, to show to the FDA, hey, this is what it looks like, when somebody has trauma healing. That's my argument, that it is real and it is in the flesh and you can shift it. And sometimes, whether the other part of it, what happens? Did they cry? What was the catharsis? Did they shake? Did the demon come out of them? All that. But that's what we want to see. We want to see their body working better again. So that's what I have to go in a few moments. So I just had to squeeze that in.
Thank you so much for that, Joe. And so we know we have a problem and we know we have a solution. Do we know exactly how the psychedelics work to heal these issues, or does that even matter?
Ultimately, it doesn't matter. The reason it's going to get approved by the FDA is because it's helping. And so figuring out how it works is it's very interesting to learn more and more and more and more and more, and to get reimbursed and to get to fight the system. So we want to learn more. But meanwhile, this need that he's talking about, all these people, the vets, everybody else, they don't want to wait for that, if it's safe.
Yeah, that's it. Safety and outcomes. That's all they care about. And in a way, they say it's not all I care about, but it is sort of what's most important. And then the rest is, not just honoring physical safety, but emotional, spiritual safety for people. And I think those are the things that still need to be worked out more thoroughly. And I feel like it's a work in progress in general. But again, very inspired by the direction things are going.
Mhm. For sure. Well, I know, Joe, you have a hard stop here and you have to leave. So I do have a couple other questions here for Ben and Keaton. So did you have any final words, Joe, before we let you go here?
No, I think I'm leaving you in very good hands right here with these two guys. So I'm sorry, I'm going to miss it. That's all.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure and we appreciate you being here.
Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, so I do have a couple of other questions, and again, just conscious of time here, I wanted to get in a little bit into AI. And people talk about AI in a very broad or vague way. It's kind of a buzzword in the press, as it seems. And Dr. Patel, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about your work with AI and what role it's playing in psychedelic medicine.
Yeah, I mean, it is a buzzword because I think there's this romantic sense that there's a computer and there's a entity living inside of it doing all sorts of magical things. At the end of the day, I mean, what we call AI is really a machine-assisted way of thinking, right? We have so many data points on so many different things. To find signals in that noise is not easy. So, you know, classically, artificial intelligence or machine learning is really better ways to create models of the universe around us, and then using those models be better at predicting a bad outcome, be better at finding, a needle in the haystack. Let's say it's a drug discovery or, something that you may be trying to model and then solve. And so I think, it's so broad. I think we probably almost are at a point now in society where we should probably just drop the term and assume it's there. So whether it's your, Word document that you're typing up and there's some level of an AI behind the scenes that's checking your grammar for you, it's pervasive. And so in psychedelics, I would say, yes, it's already well established. It's everywhere from drug discovery. I mean, there's groups that, come across that are doing some phenomenal work with compound analysis and doing high throughput screening. And they're looking for, those sort of next generation molecules, and they can do it using equations and not actual molecules inside of cells. So, computational biology is a great example of AI in the space right now. And then you have, work by folks, for example, and then just taking it right back to the world Ben and I come from, right? We have patients in waiting rooms who have clipboards and they fill out questionnaires and they throw that into something. And people are now saying, well, look, if you actually analyze these questionnaires, you can predict how well they might get. And if you could start to analyze their experience during their trip, you might have some predictors as to how well they'll do or how often they might need to come back and see you, or maybe the direction of their integration therapy. So I would say that, there's a very well-established current of folks in the field right now who are saying, here's what we've learned. We can take information, we can analyze the qualitative aspects of a person's trip and start to identify, maybe some holes or some areas that we can go towards the next time. And so is that AI or is that just really good, signal and noise finding? And so, for example, if you have a sensation of or a sense of unity or connection to something, more vast, that's far better a predictor that you may be relieved of your treatment-resistant depression than visual hallucinations. And so AI is here. It's in almost everything we do. I would say it's going to continue to be there, and it's going to be used in all those wonderful ways. There are probably some very negative ways it might be used, and so being mindful of some of the sort of negative or market-based or marketing tactical methods that artificial intelligence or machine learning might be used at is something that we have to be aware of. I can predict on social media using certain data points who has bipolar disease that's being, destabilized, and I can market to that person in a very negative and malicious way. So AI is here. I think it's kind of behind everything we do nowadays, in psychedelics, I think it's wonderful. There's a lot of nice vistas that we can go towards in using these technologies, and it'll definitely accelerate the work. And Ben mentioned earlier, we've got to go faster. We have to scale this up, and certainly it's here to help humans scale their efforts. And so, what I'd love to see AI is in the shamanic tradition. How do we capture that richness and then communicate it, catalog it, analyze it, better understand it? We don't need to potentially uncover whether it's true or not, or what exactly is happening in the brain, but if we can describe it better, then that's kind of my mantra, right? People who follow me will say he's always harping on ontologies and terminologies, but it's because I think if we can better capture it, then we can certainly better communicate and share it. Hopefully that answers the question on the AI side.
That's super interesting. Ben, did you have any questions about that or anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, I commend you, Ketan, for the fact that you're endeavoring down such a challenging road. This is definitely not my area of expertise. So, but I will say this, that I agree with a lot of these statements about we need to come up with novel ways to be able to bring people access to these kinds of care. And it's important to actually look and say, well, to question, what are the things that we are doing in human practice that might be able to be done with technology? And the one thing that always comes to mind, though, is, what does it mean to feel connected? And what role does connection play in the healing process? And this comes up a lot in our conversations here at Field Trip around, our Trip app and using digital technologies to help people through the course of their treatment. So I think they'll at the end, and my own personal prediction is that we're going to have to find a balance between the two, that you can't supplement human connection to an extent. And at least that's my prediction. But again, not my area of expertise. But I'm curious to see where it all goes.
Absolutely. It's very interesting. And, the question comes up is like, how do you quantify the ineffable, right? How do you measure that? That's the difficult question. And sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that I think that's the question that we may never answer, but at least it takes us to a place, right? So I think we started this conversation off with science and spirituality, and it's like one begets the other, because we'll keep getting to an edge or a boundary of what we can explain, the explicable universe. And then there's the inexplicable, and that kind of drives the boundary hopefully further and further and further out. So yeah, maybe we'll never codify the ineffable, but it's what we should just at least aim for.
Yeah, I think of when our clients finish treatment, many of them come out with that ineffable kind of experience. And I think it's important to honor it as ineffable and to not even try to manipulate or mess with it too much. I think we need to quantify it in some ways, as we've tried with our questionnaires and whatnot. But in practice, I think it's best to honor it as it is. And so I always encourage that of our clients as they're going out to say, well, take that one with you. Let that just be yours and yours alone. And hold it close when you're finding yourself struggling. And in the way that ends up being part of the cure. At least that's my hypothesis, is allowing them to just have that special moment that means so much to them and them alone.
Love that.
Well, thank you both so much. I'm just being conscious of everyone's time here. I was wondering, before we leave here today, if you have any final words to leave with us, or B, if you have any questions for each other.
No questions for you, Ben. I'm just a big fan of what you guys are doing. I think the idea of using technology to make access really broader for individuals is a huge push. So, I'm a big fan of tech, and I love what Field Trip is doing and what your sort of colleagues are about there. So, access, and let's go faster. Let's just do it right.
Yeah. That's the challenge. How do we do it right? And it's just going to take people like you, whose heart is in the right place and is honoring the safety of the patient. And as long as we continue to see that in this work, I think we'll figure it out.
Thank you, Shannon, for bringing us all together.
Yeah, well, thank you both. It's been such an honor to be here with both of you, as well as Joe today, to talk about magic in the brain, how science and spirituality work together synergistically and how they meet. So thank you so much for joining us. And that was a very wonderful and important discussion. And that wraps up our panel today on the topic of magic in the brain, where science and spirituality meet as part of World Psychedelics Day. So I just again wanted to say thank you so much to our speakers who have taken their time out of their schedules to take a look at these important topics in the psychedelic sphere. And then, of course, thank you to all of our sponsors for World Psychedelics Day and everyone that has contributed to make this happen, including all of you here watching with us today as well. So happy World Psychedelics Day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.